And President Trump just said what? Yep, he just promised 100% that he will testify under oath about his conversations with now fired former FBI Director James Comey. His personal lawyer must be taking oxygen.
Mr. President, we'll get back to James Comey's testimony. You suggested he didn't tell the truth in everything he said. He did say under oath that you told him to let the Flynn, you said you hoped the Flynn investigation you could let.
I didn't say that.
So he lied about that?
Well, I didn't say that. I mean, I will tell you, I didn't say that.
And did he ask you to pledge his
And there'd
loyalty?
be nothing wrong if I did say it, according to everybody that I've read today, but I did not say that.
And did he ask for a pledge of loyalty from you? That's another thing he said.
No, he did not.
So he said those things under oath. Would you be willing to speak under oath to give your version of
100%. I didn't say under oath. I hardly know the man. I'm not going to say, I want you to pledge allegiance. Who would do that? Who would ask a man to pledge allegiance under oath? I mean, think of it. I hardly know the man. It doesn't make sense. No, I didn't say that, and I didn't say the other.
So if Robert Mueller wanted to speak with you about that,
I would be glad to tell him exactly what I just told you, Joe.
And you seem to be hinting that there are recordings of those conversations.
I'm not hinting anything. I'll tell you about it over a very short period of time. Okay? Okay. Do you have a question here?
When will you tell us about the recordings?
Over a fairly short period of time.
Are there tapes?
Oh, you're going to be very disappointed when you hear the answer. Don't worry.
And late today, action from Congress, the House Intelligence Committee demanding White House tapes, if they exist, and the Senate Judiciary Committee trying to get copies of the Comey memos. With me, Senator Amy Klobuchar, Democrat of Minnesota, who serves on the Senate Judiciary Committee and went to law school with James Comey. Nice to see you.
Great to be on, Greta. Thanks.
All right, Senator, he says 100% he's willing to say, is willing to testify under oath, and you say what?
Well, that was quite a surprise, but I say great. Why doesn't he come and testify under oath? I think we want to get the truth out here. I do think, as you know, as a someone who has practiced law for a significant period of time, that the special prosecutor, former Director Mueller, when he tries to get to the bottom of what went on here with Flynn and others, he's going to talk to other witnesses. It's not just going to be a he said situation in any of these investigations. There will be people that they spoke to at the time. There'll be evidence in writing. There'll be other things they'll be looking at. And, of course, the number one on our list would be the tapes. If those tapes do exist, and when the president said that we'll be disappointed, it seems like a little clue that maybe they don't exist.
Well, the tapes, of course, if they exist, would be fascinating to me, not just for what they would capture in terms of the Comey-Trump exchange, because it's sort of hard to determine intent for that, but it would be, if there are tapes, the tapes would probably be running after Comey left the room, and does President Trump say to the next person, well, I urged him to thoroughly get to the bottom of this, or does he say he didn't take the bait, he's not dropping it? I mean, so I would actually want the next set of tapes.
Exactly. So I have no idea if he's bluffing when he sent that tweet out a while back about the fact that there may be tapes, but that would be the most significant fact. But there's so many other things that they could be looking at when they look at this, the details here.
I was trying to think, how do you tell who's telling the truth? I mean, people in politics oftentimes take sides, but you were in the courtroom for a number of years. I mean, you try to figure out with the facts, and how do you determine intent? And one of the things that I would be curious is, I would like to hear the testimony of Senator DNI Coates and NSA Rogers, who wouldn't answer the question, because if they themselves had been pressured, at least in my mind, that would tend to show that it's possible that Comey was pressured. If they were not pressured, then I would be less inclined. Not completely either way, but they won't testify.
Well, exactly, and the former FBI Director Mueller is going to get to some facts that they wouldn't talk about in public. In fact, they probably have said things in classified briefings that the public doesn't know about now. So that is a factor if you've got a similar circumstance, but also the fact that he cleared the room. I mean, that's going to be easy enough to prove. Why did he clear the room? And so there's all of that circumstantial evidence that he will be looking at. But I think the bigger issue here, when you look at what is really going on here, besides the dramatic testimony of Jim Comey that we heard yesterday, and by the way, I thought my colleagues did a good job of keeping their cool and really kind of staying away from partisanship. and did their jobs. Aside from that, we still have the issue of this major superpower in Russia that is trying to influence American elections and trying to intrude on what happened. So that part of the investigation is going to be very important, and it sometimes gets lost in all of the back and forth, and I don't think we want to forget that.
And of course, you're going to have a chance to vote maybe on sanctions next week and whether to up the sanctions against Putin and Russia, maybe to help them feel a little bit more pain. All right, you're on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and your committee has now asked, it's written a letter, both, I think it's bipartisan, to the professor at Columbia who was sort of the cutout for former Director Comey. Former Director Comey wanted to get the information to the press. He didn't want to put his fingerprints on it, apparently, and he did it through a cutout. You now want that letter. Are you going to, that memo, if they have it, do you think you'll get them?
I would hope so. It doesn't contain classified information. I think a lot of it will have to do with whether or not the special prosecutor somehow wants to keep that evidence for a while within that investigation. But I just have no doubt that eventually those memos will be public, and the sooner the better from our perspective. Remember, we've asked to have Director Comey come before the Judiciary Committee. We certainly want to have Attorney General Sessions. So we need an oversight hearing, which we have all the time. They're routine with the Judiciary Committee and the Attorney General of the United States. We not only want to talk about his last appearance and his comments about not talking to anyone about Russia, but we also have issues like the changes with the refugee and the travel ban. We've got issues with criminal justice changes, the voting commission. There's all kinds of things, and he has not yet appeared before our committee.
All right, putting back your lawyer hat back on, innocent people and guilty people both take the Fifth Amendment, and there's good reason for it. And I don't mean to suggest anything by the president. You know, I'll wait for the facts of the president. But what do you think his personal lawyer thought when he heard the president say that he'd 100% agree to testify under oath?
I have no idea. I just know that I have known Jim Comey for a long time, as you noted, since law school. I know that he's someone of integrity. I know that he knows what it means when he's under oath. I find him to be a cautious person. And so if the president goes under oath, then we'll have two different stories. But remember, that is never the end of it, because we certainly have other evidence as well that will come out.
What do you make of the fact, though, that he apparently disagreed with Attorney General Lynch in terms of how she interpreted the? He testified yesterday that she wanted him to refer to the Clinton investigation as a matter, and he wanted to refer to his investigation, because apparently I think they have different versions of what happened.
Yeah, I know. I think she had a spokesperson come out with a different version today, so I don't know what the facts are. I just know that when he told that story, I thought about what he's like. He likes to go by the rule and have protocol, and obviously I didn't like how he handled the Hillary Clinton email investigation. I've made that very clear, including on your show. But nevertheless, that bothered him, and I think he was putting that forward to explain part of why he decided to go public and get so involved in this.
Senator, thank you for joining us.
It was great to be on, Greta. Thank you.
Adam Goldberg is a former Associate Special White House Counsel under President Bill Clinton from 1996 to 1999. He worked for President Clinton when he went under oath managing his own scandal. And Eric Columbus is former senior counsel to the Deputy Attorney General under President Obama. Let me ask you the same question, Adam. When President Trump said 100% that he'd go under oath, if you were his lawyer, would that be the point when you had your stroke?
Well, maybe a little bit. I think he recognizes probably, Mr. Kasowitz, that President Trump, if he ends up testifying, it's going to be years down the road, certainly never before Congress, and not with the Republicans in control at least, and at most just before a grand jury a few years down the road if the obstruction investigation ever gets that far.
Eric?
I agree with Adam. I think this is just kind of theater by Donald Trump. He wants to match up well against Jim Comey, and says, "Sure, I've got nothing to hide. I'll talk to anyone." As we know.
So you don't think that this testimony is going to be pushed? You don't think this testimony is going to happen?
Not next week, shall we say.
Why do you say it's going to take so long?
Well, where the investigation, if it's in obstruction, is just beginning right now. He's got a whole range of witnesses. For example, if you're Mueller right now, you want to talk to Reince Priebus, you want to talk to everybody who was in the room who was asked to leave, so we could talk to Comey alone. And you want to ask, well, were you there? Did he in fact ask you to leave? And what did he tell you after about that conversation?
Eric, how do you prove this case? I mean, not prove this case. I mean, how do you look for the facts?
Well, I think you start at the bottom and you work your way up. You've got the people who, in addition to the ones who Adam mentioned, you've got the people who Jim Comey apparently spoke to shortly after the events that were recounted in his memos. People of the FBI. You've got Comey's friends, such as Ben Wittes and Daniel Richman, the Columbia law professor who apparently received the memos. You've got a whole sort of people in the White House to work your way up to. And the president is at the very top of the pyramid. He's the last person you're going to talk to, if at all.
Do you have any problem with the way Comey released that memo through a cutout?
You know, I'm less bothered by how. If I had my preference, he would have called a press conference, released the memos, and told everybody the day after he was fired.
What does it tell you that he didn't?
Not much, other than he's just a political actor as well as a law enforcement official. And I think he probably felt pretty chapped over what happened, the insults that came his way, and he wanted to put it out. And as he said, he wanted to cause a special counsel, and he got that.
I think this whole narrative of Comey as leaker is frankly bananas.
Why?
Because if anything, if a government employee did the same thing, we would be praising that person for being a whistleblower. And anyone who tried to retaliate against that person would be slapped down under the Whistleblower Protection Act.
Except let me ask you, is that this was after he left employment, which makes a difference to me. But and you know, I don't know whether he did anything before when he was still employed by the government as FBI. But the job of the FBI generally is to investigate when there's a leak investigation. That's their job. They're doing the investigation, and at least it turns out that, I mean, if he did it during his employment, we don't have any proof of that. That to me, you know, is not insignificant.
He was well. I think that it did apparently occur right after he was fired.
Yes, definitely afterwards. There's no question on this. No question on this.
And I mean, to me, it's the analogy is to someone in government who learns that her boss improperly fired a colleague because he didn't like the way the investigation was going that her colleague was handling. And then say she knows there's a memo that discusses it. She finds it in her colleague's files and provides it to the New York Times. Under the Whistleblower Protection Act, you're allowed to reveal evidence that you feel shows abuse of authority by a federal official if you're a government employee. And you cannot be retaliated against for doing that, even if you bring it to the press. Unless it's classified.
And let's remember, there's no executive privilege claim that could happen here. There's no State Secrets Act in our country.
No classified information.
No classified information.
As far as we know, we haven't seen it, but we make that.
The only person who this is reason sensitive is because it inculpates Donald Trump.
How hard do you think it is to represent Donald Trump as a lawyer?
I think it's impossible. I can't imagine, because I don't think he probably listens to advice. I don't know that you could actually trust him to give you advice. I think this is one reason why he's using his outside counsel rather than his inside counsel. Probably he doesn't want to tell anything to Don McGahn and any of the White House staff, and he's hoping what little he has to tell his outside counsel will be protected by attorney-client privilege.
How disruptive is this
to
the business of the White House?
It's incredibly disruptive. They have nobody inside the White House who's actually talking for them. They can't trust the president's personal lawyer to safeguard them or their interests, so they're just left on their own in an island with a president who clearly is looking out for number one.
To Eric, do you think they're tapes or not? I mean, we're all guessing and flying blind on this tonight, but based on the president's comments.
I think he's bluffing. I thought that from the very beginning. It's just his macho preening. Better hope there are no tapes, because I got something. He's got nothing.
And even today, his comments today about very soon, and we're not going to like it, whatever that means.
Donald Trump has a history of saying that things will be arriving in a couple of weeks that seem never to arrive. I won't hold my breath.
I think he's a tough client to represent. I must admit, and we'll be watching to see what happens. Anyway, thank you both. Coming up, the mystery now gripping the nation. We just talked about the Trump tapes. Do they exist or not? We're going to tell you what's known and not known about President Trump's past taping habits. Also, what do the president's allies think about his new promise, 100% to testify under oath? What is the political impact I will talk to former Chief of Staff for the first President Bush, John Sununu. And James Comey says Trump is lying. The president says Comey is lying. Who will the public believe? And how many people actually watched the Comey hearing? We have those new numbers. Big show tonight. Stay with us.
Oath to give your version of
100%. I didn't say under oath. I hardly know the man. I'm not going to say, I want you to pledge allegiance. Who would do that? Who would ask a man to pledge allegiance under oath? I mean, think of it. I hardly know the man. It doesn't make sense. No, I didn't say that, and I didn't say the other.
So if Robert Mueller wanted to speak with you about that,
I would be glad to tell him exactly what I just told you, John.
100%. President Trump saying he will testify under oath with Special Counsel Robert Mueller. His job? To find the truth.
He did say under oath that you told him to let the Flynn, you said you hoped the Flynn investigation, you could let, he could
I didn't
let go.
say that.
So he lied about that.
Well, I didn't say that. I mean, I will tell you, I didn't say that.
President Trump also saying that he was very happy about James Comey's testimony.
No collusion, no obstruction. He's a leaker. We were very, very happy, and frankly, James Comey confirmed a lot of what I said, and some of the things that he said just weren't true.
With me, John Harwood, CNBC editor-at-large, and Jill Colvin, White House reporter for the Associated Press. John, first to you, it's in this city, we sometimes don't wait for the facts, we take sides. It's politics. But you were in the Rose Garden today. What was it like then? Why did you pick Jonathan Karl? Any idea?
Well, it was an unusual situation, Greta, because usually the president has names ready of who he's going to call on. And he did have David Boyer of the Washington Times ready to be called on. And then he sort of threw it out there and tried to get the reporters to seek his attention by saying, well, maybe I'll call one of these killer network guys who's been treating me bad for fake news. And he finally settled on John Karl after sort of moving his finger around.
Jill, what's the environment like at the White House now? I mean, post-press conference.
I mean, well, the president right now has departed. He is in Bedminster, New Jersey. He took off shortly after the press conference. And whenever he leaves, I think there's kind of a sigh of relief that kind of you hear throughout the building. But I think that it was also this extraordinary moment that everyone witnessed. Everyone was so, interested in hearing what the president's reaction was going to be to Comey's testimony. We didn't see him tweet at all yesterday. We didn't see him comment at it at any of his events. And today we were able to actually ask him questions about what he thought of it.
It's sort of extraordinary, Joe. He's standing next to the president of Romania. We've got such important issues like NATO and also Romania being there, and yet we deviate to this. I mean, was it peculiar, the transition?
I mean, it did seem to, especially with all this Romanian press who are asking serious questions about a whole bunch of issues that are very pertinent right now. But I think also what was so interesting about the president's performance is it was such classic Trump. The whole line of questioning about are there tapes? And, at the end it kind of just evolved into this free-for-all of people screaming at him, are there tapes? Do you have the tapes? And the president kind of very coyly saying, well, you're going to find out and you're not going to like the answer and I'll tell you in a little bit, kind of keeping up that suspense that he likes to do.
And Johnny certainly took aim at James Comey.
Well, he did, and, the president was setting himself up for a credibility fight with James Comey, and that's a dangerous thing if you're President Trump. You look at the polling, and you see that large majorities of the American people say they don't believe that Donald Trump is honest. He told John Karl in that answer he was 100% willing to testify under oath. We will see whether he keeps that commitment after he visits with his White House counsel and his outside lawyer, Mark Kasowitz, but that raised the stakes for the president. And you can bet that Bob Mueller is going to want to get that testimony. Whether he gets it or not, we don't know.
Joe, do you have a sense that the president is enjoying his job, or is the tension so thick at the White House that how in the world could anybody enjoy this?
We hear a lot from people that the president talks to, and he regularly calls friends outside the White House. And we regularly hear just how frustrated he is, how angry he is, blaming the media coverage, feeling like he just can't get a break, really not taking any responsibility for any of the clouds, any of the problems surrounding the White House. But I think in moments like this, you really see that the president does seem to very much enjoy kind of the back and forth with the press as much as he likes to bash us constantly. He really does seem at home when he's at that podium, when he's talking back to people, when he has a chance to defend himself. This is a president who really feels like he's his best spokesman, and the more he interacts, the more he seems, the happier he seems to be.
But I do think, Greta, on some of the criticism he's getting, Karl Rove wrote a column in the Wall Street Journal, you probably saw it, where he said increasingly it looks like he lacks the discipline and focus to perform the basic jobs of the president. That's, if Karl is right, and certainly some of the evidence suggests that he might be, this is a mismatch of a job for President Trump, given his attention span, given the way he likes to work. And I can't imagine that he's enjoying doing a job that might not be suited to him and getting a ton of criticism in the process.
Well, there's more job information tonight, but it involves Special Counsel Robert Mueller. We have breaking news about him because NPR is reporting the White House had Mueller on its short list to be FBI director. Now, that is a job he had before James Comey took over. The idea apparently fell by the wayside when Mueller became special counsel instead. Jill, have you heard any information about that? Is anyone talking about that at the White House, that Mueller, who's now special counsel, at least it had sort of a walkthrough as a possibility for FBI director?
You know, that was something that we actually heard right before the special counsel was announced, that Mueller had been in the mix for that job. And I think what it really emphasizes there is, number one, the fact that Mueller is very widely respected in Washington, but also that Trump's search for the replacement FBI director was really this chaotic process. There were all of these names. You know, we heard that there was a short list, that Joe Lieberman was going to be his favorite. Then that just got completely torn up. He started again. We found out about the announcement and a tweet from the president suddenly. And it was this very chaotic process where lots and lots of individuals were considered.
John, where's all this investigation going? Is this going to drag nag the presidency for 4 years?
Yes, I think it's going to lag the presidency as long as Donald Trump is president. Richard Burr, the Republican chairman of the Intelligence Committee, yesterday praised James Comey after that testimony and said, "You're somebody who loves your country enough to tell it like it is." If the chairman of that committee believes that this is serious, believes James Comey, that means that's going to be a serious investigation. We know Robert Mueller's will be. And I've got to say, on that subject of Robert Mueller potentially being FBI director, given what happened in that news conference today with the president undercutting his Secretary of State on a foreign policy issue, it had to do with Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and the things that James Comey has said about serving under Donald Trump, Robert Mueller's got to be pretty happy he's not working for him.
Thank you both. Next, I'm going to talk to a prominent supporter of President Trump who once called candidate Trump, quote, thin-skinned, much like his father does. And then last night he took to TV saying the, quote, witch hunt was over. It was done. Time to move on. But that was then. What about now? A lot has changed today. His father, President Trump, in the Rose Garden at a press conference with a foreign head of state, accusing former FBI Director Comey of lying under oath. But that's not all. President Trump also with the rather jaw-dropping promise, vowing he will go under oath and testify about Comey. Bill Kristol reports Republicans are pretty terrified, and Karl Rove saying Trump lacks the focus or self-discipline to do the basic work required of a president, and his chronic impulsiveness is apparently unstoppable and clearly self-defeating. With me, former New Hampshire governor and former White House chief of staff to President George H.W. Bush, Governor John Sununu. Governor, lots of confusion here in this city, lots of criticism of the president, a lot of support for the president. Today, he did meet with the president of Romania. He spoke to Prime Minister Theresa May of the UK. I mean, he's done business. Yet, the question is, have you changed your mind about him? At one time, you called him a phony.
Well, I supported him very aggressively in the 2016 election against Mrs. Clinton, so I think it's obvious. I'm very happy Trump is in the White House.
So what do you make of all this other, the episode today where he's sort of dangling out there that there may be tapes? I don't know if there are tapes. He says he'll testify. What are your thoughts about that?
Look, this all flows from yesterday's testimony by James Comey. I think as this thing gets dissected a little bit better by calmer heads, I think people are going to begin to see that the president may be right. Yesterday may have been a much better day for President Trump than people are giving him credit for. I think Jim Comey really created some problems for himself when he talked about the memos that he leaked to the press. He claimed he did it as an afterthought when something hit him on Monday. But in fact, on Thursday preceding, the Times was quoting from those memos. And there is no way that Jim Comey could have not understood that when they were quoting so explicitly that the memos, were already leaked. So obviously they must have been leaked well before that Monday flash. So that statement on his about Monday is purely a fabrication. I think he created other problems for himself. This thing trying to make it sound as if the president asking to see him private is nefarious. Presidents grant a courtesy to cabinet members and heads of major departments to let them talk to him in private so that they can tell him as frankly as they want what they want about these issues. Frankly, at that time, the Attorney General was the one in charge of Comey. He asked the Attorney General to step out. There's nothing wrong with that. He wanted it was an opportunity that Comey failed to take advantage of. If Comey was uncomfortable with what the president told him, they were in private. He could tell him in private that that was inappropriate, but he failed to do that. The fact that Comey himself in January asked for one-on-one meeting with the president, I think set the tone for it. So all of this self-sanctification by Comey of himself and the adulation he's getting from the liberal press on finer examination of what he said, I don't think stands up.
Do you go as far as his son, Donald Trump Jr.? And look, I give a lot of latitude to children whose parents, children are a different category to me than a colleague or someone who works for you or someone. But he says that this is a 10-month witch hunt. Are you saying this is unfair investigation of Trump? Because look, the one thing is, he does get right into the spat by these tweets, by dangling there may be tapes, not tapes. He does play around a lot with it, so he doesn't have completely clean hands on this.
Look, so whether it's unfair or fair doesn't make any difference. It's been an investigation for 7 months. Burr, in the opening statement, in the opening questions to Comey, asked him if Trump or anyone in the administration had pressured him to drop the investigation of the Russian involvement in 2016. He said no. Simple, declarative no. Now, the press is jumping on the fact that later on in the conversation, Comey said, well, he was sure that Mueller would look into whether or not there was any involvement there by the president or others. I'm not sure if he said others, but certainly by the president. I'm sure that Mueller will look to see if there's involvement by anyone in this process, including was there collusion by the Democrats with the Russians. So the fact that he expresses an obvious reality doesn't mean that there's a culpability or a problem there.
Governor,
go ahead.
Always nice to see you. Thank you for joining me, sir.
Thank you. Good to see you, Greta.
Nice to see you. Well, but Comey calling Trump a liar and Trump returning the insult, calling Comey a liar, and then promising to testify under oath, it is easy to forget that there is an underlying investigation about Putin's interference in our election. So what's next with that? Attorney General Jeff Sessions does testify before a Senate panel. That'll be on Tuesday. It is about the DOJ budget, but Sessions is expected to get a grilling about the Comey testimony. Also next week, Special Counsel Robert Mueller is meeting with Senate Intel Committee leaders, Senators Warner and Burr. They want the Comey memos. And there's this. Sometime this month, President Trump's son-in-law and top advisor Jared Kushner is expected to meet with Senate Intel Committee staffers to turn over documents and answer questions. Up next, President Trump's other new promise to talk about White House tapes. Do they exist? Has he ever taped conversations in the past? We're going to tell you what he once said under oath about taping at Trump Tower. And a surprising story behind this photo. You will not believe who encouraged Governor Mitt Romney to try to become President Trump's Secretary of State. You just can't make this stuff up.
Complete vindication. And wow, Comey is a leaker.
Do you have any comments on Mr. Comey's testimony yesterday?
Sessions should resign as Attorney General.
Jim Comey, he's a leaker. He's a Washington leaker.
Mark Kasowitz will be filing a complaint with the DOJ's Inspector General and the Senate Judiciary Committee, given Comey's statements yesterday.
And this afternoon, another response from the president. This time, not on Twitter.
Do tapes exist of your conversations with him?
Well, I'll tell you about that that maybe sometime in the very near future. No collusion, no obstruction. He's a leaker.
You suggested he didn't tell the truth in everything he said. He did say under oath, you said you hoped the Flynn investigation, you could like...
I didn't say that.
So he lied about that.
Well, I didn't say that.
Would you be willing to speak under oath to give your version of
100%.
Day 140, and one of the big stories today, President Trump hinting that we may soon have an answer about whether those tapes exist or not.
You seem to be hinting that there are recordings of those conversations.
I'm not hinting anything. I'll tell you about it over a very short period of time.
When is that?
Okay? Okay. Do you have a question here?
When will you tell us about the recording?
Over a fairly short period of time.
Are there tapes, sir?
Oh, you're going to be very disappointed when you hear the answer. Don't worry.
Former FBI Director James Comey saying this during his testimony yesterday.
I've seen the tweet about tapes. Lordy, I hope they're tapes. The president surely knows whether he taped me, and if he did, my feelings aren't hurt. Release all the tapes. I'm good with it.
And after that testimony, the president's aides and allies being a bit cagey.
Are there tapes of these discussions of the president and Jim Comey?
I can't comment on that.
He said that you had no idea whether or not there was a taping system in the Oval Office. Could you try to find out? A lot of people are interested, as you might imagine.
Sure, I'll try to look under the couches.
The president's the one who suggested he had tapes of these key conversations.
Let's hope there aren't tapes. Didn't say there were.
The president's past perhaps providing some clues about whether tapes actually exist. Former employees told the Wall Street Journal that as a businessman, Donald Trump sometimes taped phone calls from his office in Trump Tower. On the other hand, in a 2007 deposition, Trump was asked under oath about recordings he claimed to have made of his conversations with a reporter, and Trump testified, quote, "I'm not equipped to tape record. I may have said it once or twice to him just to try and keep it honest." Kevin Cirilli is the chief Washington correspondent for Bloomberg News. Francesca Chambers is the White House correspondent for the Daily Mail. And Josh Lederman is a national security and foreign policy reporter for the Associated Press. First to you, Kevin. Kevin, he had a busy day today. Besides that, he blasted Qatar for funding terrorism. He was with the president of Romania. He got Romania to pony up 2% of the GM for the NATO. He called the prime minister of England. But this business about the tapes is captivating us all.
Yeah, absolutely. And yesterday the House voted to repeal parts of Dodd-Frank. Of course, they capped off Infrastructure Week. But look, they're not going to be able to move past this until the results of the Russia probe go public. And the second point that I would make is that I spoke with several Republicans, prominent Republicans, people like Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator Marco Rubio, following yesterday's hearing when they were coming on their way out. And they feel that there's not enough for obstruction of justice, but there is this overwhelming sense of frustration that they're also unified about what exactly is Congress doing, the White House doing, to prevent Russia from doing this again, regardless of whether or not you think there was collusion. The facts are...
But that's the Senate could do something. They could do the sanctions next week. They could do that.
Absolutely, and the White House has yet to take a position on Senator Graham's bill. And so potentially where all this could be headed is for the White House to say, let's actually address the problem of this cyber issue with Russia meddling into an election, regardless of whether you think that they worked with the campaign to do it.
Francesca, do you have any idea how, and I'm looking at the president's statement about these tapes that we're going to hear in a very short period of time, over a fairly short period of time. Would that be like an hour, or would that be a week? What's a very short period of time at this White House? Any idea?
Sean Spicer was asked about that afterwards, and he basically said, well, when he's ready to talk about it, Greta, he'll talk about it. So we have no idea what that means. Clearly, like I said, dragging it out. But he then said that we were probably going to be disappointed by the answer. So that, to me, suggests that there are not tapes of these conversations. If there were, why hasn't he played them already? Why does he keep saying these things at press conferences and not just saying that there aren't any tapes?
Well, he's tying the press up in knots on this.
But I think he's enjoying that. I think he's very much enjoying that. He's tweeting about it. He had to know that this press conference today was going to be about this. He didn't just shut Jonathan Karl down and then move on. He had a pretty lengthy back and forth with him about that. And then the press, and I haven't seen this when I've been at the White House, aggressively started shouting at him, when are we going to see those tapes? And then someone asked, can we see them now? Another reporter said, can I see them first? And typically, decorum-wise, that's not something that you see White House reporters doing in that setting.
And especially in the Rose Garden in front of the president of Romania. All right, Josh, I go back and forth, and sometimes I'm consumed with the whole idea of the tapes and the investigation, the Comey and everything else. But unfortunately, underlying all this, very important issues going on in the country, especially the issue with the Russian meddling in our election. And it's like sometimes we sort of, at least I do, I forget that this is incredibly important. And we've got health care, we've got tax reform, we've got so much going on.
Right. There isn't a day that goes by these days when you don't have huge stories that would otherwise, on any other circumstance, be the absolute biggest story, something the U.S. would have to be responding to, dealing with really intensely. The British election, for example, huge moment in global politics that we're not even talking about today.
But he did something about it. He called the prime minister. He's actually, if you sort of sort through all the sort of the chaos, and there's a lot of it, is that there are a lot of things that he's doing, believe it or not.
There are a lot of things that he's doing, but those things are not able to break through. And the evidence that we have that he's aware of that is his own comments to the former FBI director, James Comey, saying that this cloud of this investigation is making it impossible for him to pursue better relations with Russia.
Well, he could certainly help get rid of that cloud. Without a lot of the tweets and everything else, he could get rid of the cloud, but he doesn't seem to be helping in that direction. But anyway, let me talk about this. Must-see TV. The numbers are in, and they are staggering. Nielsen reporting today nearly 19.5 million people watched James Comey's testimony yesterday just on broadcast and cable networks. Now, of course, that does not include the people who tuned in at viewing parties or through online streaming. And even, Kevin, there were bars in this city that were open early to watch this.
It's like the whole entire city shut down. The drama, the theatrics, and both Director Comey and the president seemingly have a flair for to play to the storyline. Why doesn't Director Comey, by the way, release the memos? And why?
I know that he still has them, although he probably has copies.
Them.
Well, he may have copies of them, though.
But he brought that on himself. Come on. Release the memos. People have asked for them. What is it? Let's just get to the bottom of this.
I've got another one. Why didn't Coates and DNI Coates and also NSA Rogers answer the questions 2 days ago before the Senate committee, Senate Intelligence Committee, when there was no executive privilege asserted? They have no privilege themselves not to say it. They have oversight by the Senate, and they just said they're not answering it.
And then Coates even said he's not even sure that there was a legal basis to not even answer those questions. And of course he had to expect that was going to be asked. Yeah, so about the Comey thing, though, he's saying that he doesn't have them anymore. He said that he turned those over to Mueller and that he doesn't have them anymore, which is why his friend has also been asked for those memos. But I agree. Did you have one copy? You don't have any more copies of those that you could provide? That seems...
Russians are laughing at this.
Between Comey and between these other officials who are refusing to answer these questions, which is they still work for Trump. And every official, every cabinet member is being asked all these questions about Russia and
no, they work for us, actually, I think.
They do, but they have to make a very careful calculation
because we saw what happened to the last person.
But when Coates is asked and Roger asked by the U.S. Senate, the Senate Intelligence Committee, answer these questions, the first thing is has the president asserted executive privilege so that they can't testify? No, that didn't happen. Do they have a privilege? No, they don't have a privilege. Does the committee have oversight authority over them to ask the questions? Yes, they have questions. So why aren't they answering them? Or, you tell me.
It's a great question, but I think there's a lot of pressure on all of these people to figure out exactly how they navigate this. How much do you say? What do you hold back? And how do you characterize it? Knowing that they could easily trigger a response from the president that could really affect their reputation.
Who is looking at how to prevent Russia from doing this again? Because if it's not a political institution, what happens when it's a job?